There has always been a debate regarding the evolution of humans, from scientific evidence versus traditional conspiracies, on the other. By the end of the presentation, we will conclude whether humans are still evolving.
In 1735, Carl Linnaeus, a Swedish botanist, established biological classification where he lumped humans together, dubbed Homo sapiens, with monkeys and apes based on anatomical similarity. The greatest fossil find of the 20th century was in 1924 when two boxes of rocks containing bone fragments were excavated from a limestone quarry near Tongs in the Transvaal region. The box contained the first specimen of Australopithecus africanus, the southern ape man. The box was given to Raymond Dart, an anatomy professor of the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa, who was an amateur anthropologist. Darwin's The Descent of Man had conjectured that our species had originated in Africa because our closest relatives, chimpanzees and gorillas, are both found there. By theory, we are descendants of apes and our closest cousins are chimps. That is fact backed up by fossil and DNA sequences. In turn, debates and complications arose because newfound information debunks the story of creation. In 1925, the monkey trial teacher John Scopes went on trial in Dayton, Tennessee, and was convicted for teaching the idea that humans had evolved. The skull was in consideration a fossil. Fossils are evidence of ancient life forms or ancient habitats which have been preserved by natural processes. They can be the actual remains of a once living thing, such as bones or seeds, or even traces of past events such as dinosaur footprints or the ripple marks on a prehistoric shore. In 1871, human fossil record comprised only of a few bones of the late appearing Neanderthals. In 1974, on November 30th, Lucy was discovered by Donald Johanson, an American paleoanthropologist. Lucy is an Australopithecus afarensis dating back 3.2 million years ago. She walked on two legs. It's likely that the missing link was closer in appearance to modern chimps than to modern humans. We have much larger brains than any ape. The record of human evolution is one of the best confirmations we have of an evolutionary prediction. Our fossil record is tangled bush of many different species. Most of them went extinct without leaving descendants, and only one genetic lineage threaded its way through time to become modern humans. We've had many evolutionary cousins who died without leaving descendants. Debates of whether a given fossil is really something new or merely a variant of an already named species. Problem is that there are too few specimens spread out over too large a geographic area.
A mononym, a term applied to all species on the human side of our family tree after it split from the branch that became modern chimps. How to determine the pattern in human evolution? We know that humans began evolving in Africa, but what part of our evolution happened elsewhere? In 2002, paleontologist Michael Burnett and colleagues announced Sahelanthropus dactylensis from Central Africa deserts of Chad. The most important thing about this find is it dates between 6 to 7 million years ago, when molecular evidence tells us that our lineage diverged from that of chimps. The mosaic skull had a mixture of hominin-like features such as a flat face, small teeth, broad ridges, and also ape-like features with a long cranium with small chimp-sized brain. Ornithogenesis, 6 million-year-old fragments, single-leg bone that has been interpreted as evidence of bipedality. And there's a 2 million-year gap with no substantive hominin fossils. In 1976, the Tole footprints found by Andrew Hill and another member of the team in Tanzania, made by A. afarensis, footprints were virtually identical to those made by modern humans walking on soft ground. They date back around 3.6 million years ago. These footprints help enforce the idea of bipedality. A. afarensis might have spent time on the trees due to their arms being longer than modern humans but shorter than chimps, as well as having curved finger bones like apes. This is a great transitional form between humans and ancient apes. For example, Lucy. Lucy, from the neck up, she's ape-like. In the middle, she's a mixture. And from the waist down, she's almost modern human. This discovery made us rethink the way natural selection may have shaped modern humans. After A. afarensis, confusing melange of gracile Australopithecine species for 2 million years. Then the borderline between fossils placed in genus Australopithecus, which means smaller brain, and those placed in Homo, which means larger brain.
The first tool using human was Homo habilis about 2.5 million years ago. Fossils are associated with a variety of flake stone tools used for chopping, scraping, and butchering. Possibility that habilis was the first species with spoken language due to swelling in Broca's and Wernicke area, parts of the left brain lobe associated with speech production and comprehension. These tools were complex, stone axes and scrapers with intricate flaking. Homo erectus, the upright man, was the first hominin to leave Africa. Its remains have been found in China, Indonesia, Europe, and the Middle East. The brain size of erectus was nearly equal to that of modern humans, and skeletons were also nearly identical to ours. They are responsible for a momentous event in human history, the control of fire. They're successful in population size and longevity around 1.5 million years. Two descendants, Homo heidelbergensis and Homo neanderthalensis. Neanderthals showed up 230,000 years ago, lived all over Europe and in the Middle East. Larger brains than humans, excellent toolmakers and adept hunters. Neanderthals ceremonially buried their dead, perhaps the first inkling of human religion. 28,000 years ago, Neanderthals fossils vanished. What really happened to them is the biggest unknown about human evolution.
Migration and natural selection. Migration is the movement of populations, groups, or individuals, and gene flow is the movement of genes from one population to another. According to human evolution, there are two theories, multi-regional theory and the Alta-Africa theory. The multi-regional theory proposes evolutionary replacement, with Homo erectus simply evolved into Homo sapiens independently in several areas, perhaps because natural selection was acting in the same way all over Asia, Europe, and Africa, which has the significance of different races. This depicts that humans evolved from multiple regional points and migrating from there. The out of Africa theory proposes that modern Homo sapiens originated in Africa and spread physically, replacing Homo erectus and the Neanderthals, perhaps by outcompeting them for food or killing them, supported by genetic and fossil evidence, as said before. Natural selection is a process whereby organisms better adapted to their environment tend to survive and produce more offspring. The theory of its action was first fully expounded by Charles Darwin. An adaptation is a trait with a current functional role in the life of the organism that is maintained and evolved by the means of natural selection. Selection has proved intriguing differences between populations with ethnic groups. Populations are quite young, meaning that the selection has acted in humans with recent times. One example is our ability to digest lactose, a sugar found in milk. The majority of the world loses the ability to produce lactase, which is an enzyme that breaks down lactose in adulthood. Part of the population has been able to retain the enzyme into adulthood, however.
Speciation is the evolutionary process by which reproductively isolated biological populations evolve to become distinct species. Biologists hate the term race when it comes to humans due to the racial classification being linked to racial prejudice. Races, also called subspecies or ecotypes, are simply populations of species that are both geographically separated and differ genetically in one or more traits. Homo sapiens do clearly have races. Virtually all the genetic variation uncovered by modern molecular techniques correlate only weakly with the classical combinations of physical traits such as skin color and hair type commonly used to determine race. Only about 10 to 15% of all genetic variation in humans is represented by the differences between races that are recognized by differences in physical appearance. The remaining genetic variation of 85 to 90% occurs among individuals within races. Races don't express all of the alleles that they carry. They have different allele frequencies between each other.
Evolutionary developmental biology compares the developmental processes of different organisms to determine the ancestral relationship between them and to discover how developmental processes evolve. Determining the relationships among species is the overall grand scheme of evolution, which allows us to see what macroevolution has wrought due to the slow process of microevolution. Humanness, genes, has been the holy grail of evolutionary biology. The first attempt to find them in 1975 by Alan Wilson and Mary Claire King at the University of California. They discovered the protein sequences of human and chimps differed by 1%. The results implied that humanness rested on just a handful of key mutations. A lot more than 1.5% of our proteins will differ by at least one amino acid from the sequence in chimps. A single difference can have substantial effects. Our genomes have about 25,000 protein-making genes. Humans and chimps not only differ in the sequence of genes, but also in the presence of genes. More than 6% of genes found in humans are found in many forms in chimps. We also differ in the number of copies of genes we share. Due to all this divergence, we can't claim that humanness rests only on one type of mutation. Some racial differences give us clear evidence of evolutionary pressures that acted in different areas. Darker skin of tropical groups probably provides protection from the intense ultraviolet light that produces lethal melanomas, while pale skin of higher latitude groups allows penetration of light necessary for the synthesis of essential vitamin D, which help prevent rickets and tuberculosis. Genes that affect physical appearance points towards sexual selection. A group of humans can change their culture much faster than they can evolve genetically. Cultural change can produce genetic change. Gene-culture coevolution idea that a change in cultural environment leads to new types of selection on genes. Cohn suggests that human races are too young to have evolved important differences in intellect and behavior. The DNA data shows that overall genetic differences among human populations are minor.
How does this link with genetic drift? The homozygosity of a population, denoted as F, is the probability that two gametes chosen randomly are identical by descent because they trace back to the same gene copy in previous generations. By definition, F ranges from 0 to 1 because the probability of two gametes being identical by descent is 1 over 2 to the NE. Heterozygosity, the probability that two gametes are not identical by descent, is denoted H and calculated as H is equal to 1 minus F. The major implication is that all populations of finite sizes will eventually drift to fixation where H is equal to 0 and only a single allele remains, unless diversity is maintained by mutation, gene flow, or natural selection. Differences in anatomy, physiology, behavior, language, and brain size and configuration between us and our closest relatives. Classes of genes that have rapidly evolved in human branch of divergence includes genes involved in immune system, gamete formation, cell death, sensory perception, and nerve formation. There's an ambiguity towards evolution. I found your evidence for evolution very convincing, but I still don't believe it, is what a lot of people would say. But despite substantial supporting evidence, people still doubt evolution. Fossil records, biogeography, and several other aspects of evolution are proof enough of evolution. There are no observations that prove evolution to be false.
Evolution is true. No doubt among biologists that evolution is true, but differing views on how evolution occurred and its roles of its mechanics. Debate and testing of alternative theories drives the field forward just like most other fields. What about now? Well, are humans still evolving? Humans are a special case. Our species can be considered infinite in regards to other species populations. Our brains have allowed us to think of ways to disregard natural selection in a sense. Most species are suited up for one type of niche or another and wouldn't do so well otherwise, while other are generalist species suited for a wide range of environments. Human inventions such as buildings, clothing, air conditioning, heating, cars, technology, mainly, computers, agriculture allows us to survive in areas where we wouldn't otherwise. Humans' use of technology has slowed down evolution because technology has made it so that natural selection wouldn't really have that much an effect. There are still mutations that occur in human genome, but with such a large migrating population, stabilizing selection makes it difficult for any mutation to become fixed. Does this mean that humans will look the same now, about like 100,000 to a million years in the future, if our species do survive that long? Maybe, but it all depends on the effect of natural selection that technology can't counteract us. Human variation in skin tone was something we evolved since we sprung out of Africa, and the ability to produce lactase as an adult are examples of our species having evolved in the past, but only time will tell what evolution has in store for the human population.